what I want to first do on this particular video topic is give a shout out to this particular sovereign group that I've learned about in my travels since I've been educating and teaching people on this particular subject. And I'm not going to be really detailed about this group right now because I respect the fact that when you move in this type of movement, you have to be somewhat secret. The reason for that is because you're going to have people that want to extort your resources and use your resources.
Approaching 60 at
So it's important that you keep your commodities and your resources private. And I'm not nowhere near the form of a snitch. Even though you really can't snitch being a sovereign because you're not involved in any type of a government. But still, you have different enforcement agencies
out there
that will extort you for your resources as a sovereign in the name of the law. It's really what they're using is codes, and they're using codes to get money out of you. They can leave, and this is how they operate. This is how they legally operate within their corporate structure that they may be in. So I'm not going to give too much information. I just want to send a shout out to them because I've met many of the females in this group. I started meeting a lot of the females, and they support me on the airwaves and things of that nature, and they're doing a lot for their children. And they're totally independent, so I just want to send a shout out to them. And I also met a lot of the males. I've been meeting a lot of the males in the group recently, and they're very active as well. So sending a shout out to them, and eventually, if things work well, maybe we can go public and, talk about our treaty or what they have. What I want to do on this episode is brief episode, I want to talk about weapons. It's important because many people, they hear me talk about all of this stuff, they're like, you talking about iron, all of these resources, and, tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. What's going to stop somebody, if it is real, what's going to stop somebody from just robbing you or just holding you hostage and kidnapping you so that they can get this information out of you? And first thing you have to learn, I had a really good martial arts teacher. Actually, my martial arts teacher was he had a personal contract worth, at that time it was worth $8,000. He got paid $8,000 a week, actually, to work for Bruce Lee back in the day. And this was my teacher as far as teaching myself about martial arts and things of that nature. So the first thing he taught us is that you are a weapon. You are a moving weapon. I mean, of course you have guns and knives and things of that nature, but first and foremost you are a moving weapon. So you have to learn the different aspects of your body that can be used as weapons, the main parts, and that's what I'll talk about in this episode without giving too many details. And it's important because the government knows this. They know that anybody that's trained to use their body a certain way as a weapon, like in many states, they'll make you get registered as a weapon because they know that you can hurt or potentially do someone in. So it's important that you understand each state. When you're moving through each state, you got to understand how they would look at you as a sovereign, as far as are you keeping weapons on you? Are you traveling with guns and knives on you? If you're doing that, you got to understand that knives is one thing, but then when you talk about handguns and things of that nature, you're talking about serial numbers, serial codes. These can be governed by UCCs. And you can move as a sovereign with these weapons, however, you would have to own every number on that serial code. See, a lot of these street guys don't know this. They walk around with guns and knives, things of that nature. And they don't realize that you would have to own every single number
Face mask required while running the gun.
And if you don't, you are running a risk of being extorted, and not only that, but possibly being charged by law enforcement for having that weapon. And even if you used it, or if that weapon was used in a so-called crime, that's the first thing that they're going to look at is the serial number. So that's important. That's going into a second degree of weaponry when you talk about certain crimes that are done with weapons. I'll talk about that in another episode. But we have essentially 5 weapons is what I teach, mainly, or 4 or 5, depending on how you want to look at it. And mainly it's your hands, your hands, your head and your feet. So you would say mainly it's 3 or 4, and then you have your body parts. For males, of course, you have your penis or phallus, and then for females, you have your vagina. These are weapons. Seriously. And we used to be taught as weapons. Like back in the indigenous times, we used to be taught that these were weapons. And then what happened was that they changed the doctrine over time. And they began to teach us, basically it made us a slave to these very weapons that we have, our hands. We can't control what our hands and our fingers do. We can't keep our hands to ourselves because we're not in control of our weapon anymore. Our mind and our head, and your head is a weapon, your hair is a weapon. We have no control over these things anymore because we've been indoctrinated into the matrix. But these are our weapons. So of course the first and number one weapon is your head. You have different aspects of your head. You have your eyes, you have your hair, and then you have your crown chakra, which is essentially the 3 parts of your head that can be used as weapons. Your eyes are weapons, believe it or not. Anything that you look at, you are influencing the molecules of that. That's why you shouldn't stare at certain people or stare at things if you don't want to infringe on a person's free will. Actually staring at a person is infringing on their free will because your eyes are weapons. So, I mean, of course we do it, but I'm saying, like, you know, in hindsight, on a universal level. I mean, of course, I'm not telling the person, if you're doing that, then you're doing it. I'm not saying you're evil. I'm just saying on a universal level. So you have to learn how to use these things. Your hair is a weapon. The intent, your hair is an antenna. You can get information from people, from different constellations, through your hair, through your crown chakra, so that's a weapon. Then you talk about your hands and your feet, your legs, these are all weapons. Actually, it's your feet, which support your legs. Your feet are weapons, so like you know in karate, of course they kick. They use their hands to kick that thing. So these are weapons, and not only that, you have to own these if you want to move in certain states. And I won't teach this publicly. However, I teach it privately. You have to learn how to own it. You have to own these parts of your body. Each part of your body is owned as a corporation. They're not teaching people this. So, for instance, your hands are owned as a company. That's right, a company owns your hands. It may be a company out of some country over in Asia. It could be a company somewhere over in Europe. Who knows? But we do know, and there's many researchers out there to prove this, that the body parts are owned privately, and we're being privately traded. So when you talk about your body as a weapon, it's not just for talk, it's to learn martial arts and learn how to kick people's ass, but it's actually a serious topic. When it comes to taking back the shores, you can't claim land, you can't do anything if you haven't took back your private part of course, for instance. This can be used as a weapon to contact people and things of that nature. If you haven't claimed that, you know nothing of what I'm talking about. You're like, what do you mean claim that? That's why I say I teach private classes on this, but there are ways that you have to claim or accept for value all of your body parts if you really want to essentially be free, or a free man or a free woman in this matrix. So I'll come back at you again on that type of level, talking about weaponry again in the future, because I'm going to mix it in. When I start talking about the different states and how they're sovereign, I'll bring back up weapons again on a different level. You know, we can talk about bombs and all of that type of stuff, but it's different levels to it. I mean, as a sovereign, of course you can own these things. I mean, you hear about Jim Jones and them. Back in the 70s, they owned weapons and stuff like that, but how did they do it? Why did the government come and attack them eventually? I can answer all of that for you. Why did the government attack Malakazi? What was he doing? Why did the Panthers get attacked? Why did they have to go to court and eventually do time? All of these things can be answered. And it's not to say that you're immune to it just because you know these things, but knowing is half the battle, of course. No G.I. Joe. I'm just using that as an acronym. But I'm going to come back up with you with all of these topics and more. So thank you guys for supporting, as always. I'm going to go ahead and shut down. Stay vigilant.